Hi, teachers and staff. In this brief training, we're going to walk through one of my favorite parts of the smartboard that I believe is very highly underrated, and that is the widgets section of our smartboard. The ability to be able to toss in a timer or clock or dice or many other different widgets in the blink of an eye in any part of our board, even on the home screen itself. A widget can be tossed in at any given time in any part of my lesson. And they can even be customized to fit your students' needs or your needs, depending on what it is that you're presenting. So let's walk through each widget, how we can customize our widgets and save them to our profile itself, and then how we can bring them in just about any spot in our lesson or from any page or any place on our smartboard. So the widgets are the little boxes that are in kind of the center left section of our smartboard. When I click there, it's going to pull up all the different widgets that you have access to. You'll notice that I have a lot of them. That's because over the course of trainings, I've added some of my own custom widgets. But there are 4 main widgets that can be accessed anywhere on your board. That is the dice, the clock, the spinner, and the timer. We'll go through each of those in depth a little bit later, but I just want to highlight first that there's 4 main widgets that can be brought in just about anywhere. So for example, I can bring in a clock directly on my home screen. Just as a quick example, and if I press it, I can even drag it around. Now, why would I need one? I'm not really sure. Maybe I'm working on time with analog clocks and I want to highlight the difference between digital and analog. I can do that right on the home screen. I can also press it and drag with my little box on the bottom and make it bigger, just for example. The second that I go somewhere else, notice that the widget doesn't move. The widget is an overlay on top of whatever it is that's happening on the board. So again, if I go home, it's going to still be there. If I go into Google Slides, it's still going to be there. That widget stays until I get rid of it or until I go somewhere where the widget simply cannot go. So for example, if I go in, is it really going to stay? Get out. I learned something new while in this training, but I'm not going to get rid of it because I want to highlight the fact that this widget is still here. Now, one other thing that I quickly wanted to highlight is a few widgets that are only accessible within the whiteboard application of the board itself. So all that I did was I went into a whiteboard file that I already made, or I could have just gone into a new one here. And what I'm doing is I'm pulling in widgets that are only accessible on the whiteboard. And what else is cool is in the whiteboard, it saves the widgets directly to that whiteboard slide. So for example, if I move a spinner over here, make that a little bit smaller, I go back to my home screen, those widgets don't come with me because they're being saved directly to that whiteboard file. So the next time that I go into that file, those widgets will actually still stay there. So while widgets can be moved about throughout different programs, such as my home screen, if I add it in directly in the whiteboard file, it'll stay there for me. So one other thing I wanted to highlight is the few widgets that are only accessible in my whiteboard, which are the math ones, such as the protractor or the ruler, just as a few examples. So there are some cool things that can be done with these. One thing that I love about the protractor is I can adjust, for example, the angles. I can, it's going to give me a hard time. I can show 360 degrees versus 180, and I can also hide the angles, which is nice if working on identifying what degrees that angle is at. And I can even bring out the angle to show what that looks like side by side with the protractor. So again, just a little bit of bells and whistles that I can add in with my widgets directly from the whiteboard itself. Now let's talk about customizing our widgets. Regardless of what widget you want to use, I'm going to show you the ins and outs of each one of them and what you can customize and what you can't. All right, everyone, what I'd like to do now is I want to just walk you through the main 4 widgets that are accessible from anywhere, what you can customize, how you save your customized widgets to where they can be accessed anywhere at any time. The first is the die. So when I press it, it's going to spin on a number from 1 to 6. It does spin for quite some time. I asked Smart, they aren't changing it. After it lands, it's going to give me my number. If I press off to the right just a smidge, it's going to kind of highlight that for me. This is where I can change the size of the die and also move it around. Just a quick side note, and then I press off of it and it will go away. But this is also where a little drop-down arrow will pop up and I can go into settings. Here I can change out a lot of different features of the die. I can change, for example, the color of the die. I can also change out the number of die that are in that widget. It goes up to 9. for each one. So I could customize, just for example, multiple die widgets and have students' names on each of them, because you can also do text on each die if I wanted to. But what I'm going to do is, let's say I just want 5 die, but I want to change this out to text just to show you. Now on each die is going to be different letters or words. But if the words get to be too large, it is difficult to read them. So for example, if I wanted to, on this first facing die, type the word cat, and on this facing die, type the word dog, you get the idea. But just as an example, if I put my name in here, it does get kind of small. Oh, I just pressed, oh, that's good to know. You could press enter and add in 2 words if you wanted to, and it's still readable. It just gets a little bit tricky. Now, if I want to go back and spin my die, you can see that it has cat, dog, and David on each little die. So here, oops, let me roll it one more time, and I'll make it nice and big this time so you guys can see it. So there's what it landed on this time. Hopefully this gives you just an idea of what can be done with the die. Again, you could add multiple die that just have numbers as well, even for different addition problems for my primary learners, or all sorts of different avenues and options that you could use with your die. If I want to save this, I'm going to press this little outline again, drop down, and press plus my widgets. And I'll show you what that looks like, how to rename your widget in just a minute. I'm not going to save this one. So I'm going to go ahead and press delete. Next up on our list is the clock. I can also customize this just a smidge, not as many customization settings, but if I go into settings, I can change this from an analog to a digital clock, or to both, to kind of show how those two things will match up here. But note also, while I'm changing things, let me reset that to the exact time, because as I was adjusting things, it actually changed out the time on me. So this is the exact time that's going on right now. And when I change things out, it may change the time and I have to reset it. So just keep that in mind. Once it's good to go there, I can also change this to a 24-hour clock if I'm in digital. So if you want students to be aware of kind of elapsed time or what that looks like on a 24-hour versus 12-hour clock, that may help them out there as well. I can press my back arrow once I'm good to go and I want to show it. It also gives me an AM, PM on analog. If I wish to save this again, I can press my drop down arrow and go to plus my widgets. I'll show you what that looks like on the timer. Let's talk about the spinner. This is a fan favorite. I can also customize this guy as well. If I go into my settings, there's a few different kind of opportunities here to customize. Sorry, I just want to go back here. I can add text to each spinner. So for example, I'm just going to put test and test 1, just so you can see a few of them. I can also add, it looks like, I had to double count. It looks like I can add up to 12 on each spinner. So you could even use this as a student randomizer. If you have, let's say, 24 students, you could have 2 spinners. And again, you can save these, so it's not like you have to remake them every time. So I'll show you how to save it for this one, just because this is a good example. So if I press back here, now I have a spinner with a few students' names that I can make nice and large. And then let's say I'm going to pick who my student helper is for the day. I already have this set, good to go. All I have to do is press it, and it will spin and land on a student. If I wish to save this or make it smaller so I can actually see what in the world I'm doing, let me make it smaller first. I'm going to press the drop down and press plus my widgets. I will actually do it this time since this is a good example and I might want to save this. When I press plus my widgets, it looks like nothing happened. But what happened is off to the side, back in my widgets menu, it added in the widget spinner that I just made. And then if I press it, it's going to bring in a copy of that widget. Let's say I want to rename it though, because right now it's just titled spinner. All I have to do is press edit list and press on where it says spinner, and I can just write test 1. Done editing. Now test 1 spinner is set to go, and remember, I can do this from anywhere. So if I go into Google Chrome and I pull in test 1 spinner, it's going to pull up right on top of there, and it's good to go. Let's say I want to choose who's going to take the lunch bins down, right? There's my spinner with half of my students on it, just as an example. Last but not least is the timer. This is the widget that I find staff using the most out of all of them, even though I could find purposes for all of them. This can really be embedded into just about everything because how often do you need a 1 or 2 or 3 minute timer during rotations or lining up or whatever? It's really easy. Just pull it in and press play. So same thing, if I want to customize, I press off to the right, drop down, go to settings. I can choose whether it counts up or down. And really quick, on alarms, you have to set it to where it has an alert sound. It starts with none. So if I want an alert sound, let's say I want bell 2, I'll change the color out really quick, and I'm going to change it to a circle. So there is what my timer looks like. That's pretty hideous. Let's go over here. We'll go to blue. Okay, so now when I go out, here's what my timer looks like. And that is what it's going to look like every time I bring it in. It's a 5-minute timer. But just as an example, I'm just going to go from 8 seconds so you can hear what it kind of sounds like and what it looks like as it's running. And even as the timer is running, I can move it around and it's going to keep going until that timer goes off. If I wish to save that exact widget, same thing, off to the right, press, drop down, press plus my widgets, and now that 5-minute timer is set. If you change the time to 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and then press plus my widgets, it will save the 2 minute and 30-second timer to where anytime you're anywhere. So if you are in, again, let's say, oh, I don't know, screen share, just as an example, and you pull in, oops, oh, I didn't have that timer set, but you pull in any timer, right? Here's a 4-minute timer that I had already saved. I can press play and be ready to go on any screen, anytime. I know teachers are really short on time always, so thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed and get an idea of how you could use widgets in your classroom.